Yes, I do. It was actually the Symphony Number One, and I must have been 10 or 11 years old, and it was the orchestra, student orchestra of the Wiener Musikhochschule at that time, with Karl Österreicher. So that was quite some time ago.
Do you remember your reaction? Did you have the feeling there is something new for?
No, at that age for me everything was sort of new, and it was not that I was immediately drawn especially to Gustav Mahler. I have to say the next experience I remember with Gustav Mahler was Mahler 5 with Scholti, and that was like an earthquake for me. That I remember very well. I think I was 15 or something like that, and from that moment onwards, I had sort of a real interest in that music. Yes, I think the danger anyway is always there in music, but especially in Mahler, that as a conductor you become self-indulgent, and it's so easy to do with that sort of music. But I think, especially in from number 6 onwards, it takes away the modernism of his music, and also the finesse of the instrumentation, like in that Nachtmusik, the second Nachtmusik in Mahler 7, or when you look at Das Lied von der Erde. I mean, if you overpower the first movement, you can go home, because there's nothing to follow. You have to keep all these, not only the architecture and the form, but actually, if you want the architecture in emotions, these are all carefully planned. You have to keep the architecture, otherwise you just sort of handle yourself from one very emotional moment to the next one, and all in the end what it becomes is boring. I actually still know a lot of people, and also when I grew up here in Austria, a lot of people sort of in the generation before me said, Mahler, that's bad taste. Because when you look at the arts altogether, the sort of, if I have to put it in a little sloppy way, the ego trip was not fashionable. And now look at how our society has developed since the Second World War, and how, especially starting in the 60s, the ego trips have become sort of more and more important. No wonder that at first, also that relates to what you said before, to the self-indulgent interpretations of his music. These ego traps, which you easily can take in Mahler's music, sort of via that, Mahler's music has become attractive again and appealing. Sometimes it actually, I feel a little taken back by it, because it so easily, to my taste, can be overdone, and there's always that trap for me. But at the same time, if you take it in a less personal sense and a sort of a more universal sense, then I find it extremely touching. But it's not via a self-indulgent interpretation. That makes it difficult for me. You know, I'm always very taken by composers when they speak about the last things in life, when it's close to death. If you look at Schubert, if you look at Mozart, if you look at Wagner with his Parsifal, if you look at Bruckner 9, or the last piano sonatas by Beethoven, the string quartets and so on, where it becomes less, in a certain sense, less materialistic and more less real in a way, and that's why Mahler 9, especially the last movement and especially the last page, for me is very interesting, and the same is also the last few pages of Das Lied von der Erde, because with very little, only sort of late composers can do that, with very little to say much more than with all the bombast of previous pieces. For me is really interesting not the complaints about the house as it is, and I think it hasn't changed that much since his time. It's if you look at it from a positive angle, there's no other city in the world where the opera house is the topic of such fights and intrigues and politics and all that, which means it's very important. And so I really value that very highly, that people still can fight over something like an opera house, and that is very unique. What interests me is what he did artistically. I mean, if you look at his first year, and I think I'm right when I say he conducted basically every production of any piece they did at that time. He wanted to judge it from the conductor's podium, and not only sitting in the audience or watching rehearsals. That's amazing. I couldn't do that. I mean, that's beyond human, what he did there. For sure, yes.
Beginning fourth symphony?
Absolutely.
Can you explain?
I think the sort of the specifics of the Viennese horn, the string sound, which has been so famous for decades and decades and decades, and the Viennese oboe, very important, because also in Mahler's music, like in Bruckner's music, certain solos are really low, which is easy on the Viennese oboe than on the French oboe. So I think these sound specifics have influenced him a big way.